shareholders a lot.
You know, with the shareholders.
Thank you so much. How are you?
Zippy, this is Ronaldo.
Yeah, I'm next to you. No, the peppers.
Is it toy?
Yeah.
This is the nanny.
I like your happy socks. You
That's
you have
mine,
happy
not
socks.
yours.
Hey, you guys all have happy socks. Okay, I think I
That's
like
mine
yours
then.
better because yours have. Good afternoon. Welcome back to Markets Today. I'm your host, Mbithe Mwema. Co-hosting the show with me is Mr. George Bodo. Today, we have breaking news that's happening on the NSC. NBK, the Board of National Bank of Kenya, has today sent a circular to its shareholders. The board actually thinks that KCB should be paying 60% more than what it was offering, which, if you recall, was 3.8 shillings a share. The board of directors has actually engaged in the independent advisors to value the company, and they say as of today it should be valued at 6.01 shillings per share as opposed to the 3.8 shillings per share. With regards to timelines, KCB has 15 days to vary its offer. If it doesn't vary its offer, then the shareholders will have an additional 5 days from the 24th of July to either accept or reject the bid. The other important timeline for you to note is within 10 days, NBK will be allowed to receive any competing orders. But the board of directors has been very equivocal in saying that there are no competing bids that are out there. So it seems like KCB will have the day, but it's really a question of pricing and what price will be used for this transaction. George, I'm eager to hear your thoughts, and you look very eager to share your thoughts.
Yeah, I think the board is right.
Right?
That is a massive undervaluation. I think their sense it should actually be one share of one KCB share for every 6.23 NBK shares.
Okay.
Yeah. However, I think it's if you look at the statement, it's actually the chairman's statement. It's largely an advisory and word of caution to shareholders. that in exercise of this offer, if you're dealing with KCB,
just know
that you're being massively undervalued,
and you could actually extract more
so
value.
that has some implications. One of the implications is that in the next state, because we have in the next 8 days, because we have until July 17th for competing offers, we could probably see someone spring up and say maybe they can pay a little higher.
Okay.
Or KCB could vary the offer, or even shareholders could reject some of this, but it's a very complex transaction.
It's very complex. Yeah. I see two things.
NSSF,
actually, that's what I was going to touch, and I see a couple
also both on the
KCB. I see a couple of things happening, mostly on the shareholders, and I like that you have touched that. So NSSF is at 48%, and the government of Kenya is at 22%. Yes. And when you actually look at the wording from this statement, it's not really the board speaking as though it's purely representing NBK rights. It seems it's a shareholder who actually has an influence on the board and is communicating and saying, can we get a better price?
Yeah, I think
if you ask me, I would probably say maybe NSSF at 48% ownership, that actually stand to gain slightly more. And if you remember, for this transaction to go, they need a 75% success rate. So if NSSF alone says they're not going to take over this this structure that KCB has proposed, then the deal falls through. What do you think about that?
I think that, look, I mean, we have to be very careful here, because one is that there are also another consideration, which is in the preference shares.
Exactly.
The non-cumulative preference shares.
Okay.
About 1.1 billion, out of which Treasury owns about 900 million shares out of it, and the balance held by NSSF.
But George, just hold on the preference shares. I think there's also a caveat there, because the government of Kenya is okay to actually convert its preference shares to ordinary shares, but subject to the takeover by KCB. So I don't think they actually have any voting right at this point in time. Up until KCB says, done, we're taking this, then all the preference shares are actually converted. So there's sort of a lag effect in terms of when the government...
conditional
conditional conversion. You're absolutely
which is
right.
Subject to... So that means that if someone else comes and tables an offer, then the issue of preferences is out of the table.
Greed is good?
Greed is good.
Greed is good.
Good on Gecko.
Good, exactly.
Greed is good.
Greed is good, but don't go anywhere. We want to maybe touch on this a little bit more. In our studio, we are hosting Ronaldo De Souza. He's the head of research at Sterling Capital. Now, Ronaldo has 6 bits of information that he wants to share with us. He has an extensive report. He has been covering the telco sector from October. Every 2-3 weeks, he has actually been publishing a report. We want him to talk to us about the power of pricing, the element of dominance, and in his role to tell us what he thinks about NBK. Don't go anywhere. We will be back after the break. And also remember, we are running live on YouTube. Look out for us on Metropole TV. See you shortly. And we are back on Markets Today. We have just touched on breaking news with regards to National Bank of Kenya, where the board of directors say that the company should be valued 60% above the value that KCB has attached to it. That is 6.1 shillings per share, as opposed to the initial offer of 3.8 shillings a share. We will be discussing that, as well as the pricing power in the telecom industry. To help us with this deep dive is Mr. Ronaldo D'Souza. He is the head of research at Sterling Capital. Welcome, Ronaldo.
Thank you.
How's it going?
Not bad.
All right. We're just seeing the breaking news that's coming out on National Bank of Kenya. What do you think? Do you think 6.1 wins the day, or 3.8 just remains the price?
First, I would say I'm surprised when you look at both companies, both banks. National Bank is a distressed company, in my opinion, and I'd say the bargaining power is actually limited when it comes to bargaining on a price. The push is actually, in my opinion, coming from the government. A few weeks ago, we saw the government saying that that the company would collapse, or the bank would collapse, if it does not get this, if there's no buyout. So I actually think 10 shillings, 10 shares for share was a fair value for a distressed company.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
And I think I agree, but it seems like it's a matter of either the NSSF and the government of Kenya through the Treasury are not coming to an agreement, or they're not aligned.
Yeah, I think NSSF is fighting Treasury, by view.
Could be.
Yeah, and we could see that because even in Parliament, the Parliamentary Finance Committee is actually ordered for a special audit. They actually dispatched the Auditor General to do a special audit of NBK. I think this is all delaying tactics.
Okay.
And when I read the chairman's statement, which was largely an advisory to shareholders, in my view, it was just largely, I could see all of it written NSSF.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Actually, when you
remember that NSSF,
okay,
if the conversion of the preference shares, the non-cumulative preference shares, goes ahead, then Treasury gets an upper hand in the allocation, because Treasury has about 900 million shares.
Actually, we did an off-the-cuff just calculation to see if this transaction actually succeeds. The government moves from 22% holding in NBK to 66% holding.
Yes.
Largely because the conversion of the preference shares is on a one-to-one basis.
And now when you convert that to because they will, and KCB will actually merge with the bank.
Exactly.
When you convert, because KCB acquires all these ordinary shares.
Then the government has a bigger say.
Will actually get even a more an upper hand in KCB. Shareholder, because right now they're the largest shareholders.
Wow.
And NSF is the second largest shareholder in KCB. So I think the government essentially, this whole transaction leaves National Treasury with an upper hand.
Wow, interesting.
And that's why, for me, my views, I see NSSF also fighting back.
It does, but when you look at the bigger picture, if government increases its shareholding in KCB, what does it mean for the share? Because KCB, like Equity Bank and say Safaricom, is one of the most traded shares by foreign investors.
Yeah.
So foreigners tend to prefer stocks that have less of government shareholding or government influence.
Yeah, essentially and that's a very good point, because if the government increased shareholding in KCB even by, let's say, 400 basis points, then the government discount on KCB's valuation also goes up, because typically you've always applied a government discount on a tightly controlled entity by the government.
But
and the discount comes from the fact that the government can always interfere with anything.
But not necessarily, because if this transaction happens and you have the government of Kenya moving to 66% holding in NBK, remember, if the transaction goes at 3.8 shillings a share, then KCB's dilution will be about 5%, 4.59%.
Yeah.
So effectively, the government holding in the combined entity will not be as magnanimous as if it were a standalone. It will probably be less than a percentage point dilution.
But we still give them an increased shareholding by a couple of basis points in KCB.
And also think about it, when you think about government-owned businesses.
Yes.
There's a lot of or foreigners tend to believe that government does not run private business well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think the conversation should be around, should government still be in holding or banks?
Yes, and also look at the recent mergers. When you look at the merger or the proposed merger between NIC and CBA, you see some strategic drivers. There's a reason why they won't merge. There must be strategic reasons.
Yeah.
But in this case of KCB taking over NBK, it looks more of a big brother bailing out
small brother.
Wow.
You don't see that strategic picture.
Yes. In fact, the talk is that NBK will weigh down KCB's performance.
Yeah, look at those huge portfolio.
You're creating another bad book, because KCB has come from having an old, you remember when it used to report maybe 5 years ago, they'd always have two reporting templates, one for the good book and one for the legacy book.
Yes.
So you have effectively introduced another legacy book through NBK.
Skeletons and more skeletons out of the closet.
So let's look out for the day. Let us see how this goes on.
Should be filling up for our viewers.
Certainly. Let's come back to Safaricom and the telecoms, and we're talking about marketing, pricing power, and whether Safaricom is losing its grip. You have done detailed reports, excellent reports over the last 6 or so months, just trying to evaluate what's happening there. Tell us what's happening with Safaricom in terms of its grip in the industry.
When we look at Safaricom's pricing power, we look at it on the basis of the services they provide. So there's voice calls being the main revenue earner. There's M-Pesa, which is the fastest growing revenue earner. You also have mobile data, fixed data, and we have SMS. So when you look at this individually, you'll find Safaricom has pricing power on particular services.
Okay.
To be specific, when it comes to voice calls, Safaricom, in our opinion, has no pricing power. Over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen the stiff competition between the telcos, Airtel and Telcom reducing their tariffs, and Safaricom losing market share as a result of this reduction in tariffs. We're seeing the same case with mobile data. Mobile data where Airtel and Telcom, which are major players in mobile data, reducing their tariffs, and a significant loss of market share by Safaricom. When you look at services like M-Pesa, Safaricom has a pricing power in that, and when you look at the tariffs, Safaricom has been able to charge what people say it's quite expensive when you look at the charges for transferring money or making mobile payments, but this has not, or even introduction by the competition, of the similar services has not led to a reduction in market share.
Wow, okay. And then just if I take you back to the data, I think I saw there was a headline in the local dailies earlier today that said for the end of the last calendar year, Safaricom's year as at end of March, they had reduced their data tariffs to about 42%. That seemed like a bit of a material cost shape, I thought. Is that something material? Is that something to be worried about? How are they making money with data?
It is material because mobile data is a fast-growing revenue earner. And when you look at the competition reduced the tariffs by almost 50%. And when I talk about the competition, I'm talking about both Telecom and Airtel, which have almost similar tariff structures. So when these two reduced their tariffs, Safaricom lost a significant market share.
Wow.
And if you look at market share data, because it's released every quarter, when Safaricom responded by reducing its reducing its tariffs, it was able to gain some market share or even sustain the market share that it already had, which means that the typical Kenya data consumer, mobile data consumer, is very it's price sensitive. So any reduction would result in a loss of market share.
Okay. Another is possession of pricing power. Does that equate to dominance, or it's not?
There are two things. If you look at the definition of pricing power as per the monopolies, or so they say a company that holds more than 50% of market share is dominant.
Yeah.
But also there's a difference between the two. You can be the main or the dominant market player, but you're not exercising that dominance by, say, prohibitive measures.
Yeah, you're not abusing dominance.
Yes, and in the case of Safaricom, it's debatable. When you look at specific things they have done, for instance, when they tell the agents that they have to be exclusive M-Pesa agents, such actions could
those
be
clauses.
Yes, such actions could be considered prohibitive in terms of, or that would curtail the competition.
Yeah, actually, I think the regulator has responded. I think they responded a couple of months back and said that they removed those exclusivity clauses, the Competition Authority of Kenya. They say that having such binding clauses elevates the barrier to entry, so they actually removed them. So I think now their agents are free to display other mobile money platforms, like for instance Airtel or T-Cash. Yeah, so there's been an element of abuse of dominance, which some of them have been corrected. Yes. And one of them is also the regulators forcing telcos to disclose the cost of each transaction. Today, if you send an M-Pesa, you'll see that it gives a cost at the end, so some more transparency. But my question is, if you look at the voice market, Safaricom still has something north of 60% in terms of market share, and that's in terms of total mobile subscriptions.
Yes, it's
true. If you look at even the voice traffic, yes, it's extremely on net.
It's true. When you look at voice traffic, as much as they might have lost market share in terms of subscribers, most of the calls, even from Airtel or Telecom, are calls towards Safaricom numbers.
Yeah.
So the voice traffic, it is still being
skewed towards
Safaricom. I think, gentlemen, just have a quick pause there. The market is closing. We're having the closing bell. We'll be back in a few seconds. We're back talking about Safaricom dominance and pricing power. We just took a short break a few seconds ago, but you were telling us what is happening in that space. You're having a very interesting conversation with George regarding the pricing power and the dominance on voice.
Yes, when you talk about voice, we say that Safaricom, most of the voice traffic is actually towards Safaricom numbers. So almost 90% of the traffic is either originating or disseminating in Safaricom.
That brings a very important question. With something we discussed here with a previous telco analyst, and the issue is the issue of MTR, the mobile termination rates. Yeah. Right now we're one of the lowest in sub-Saharan Africa, but the other players have actually been pushing for MTR to be zero. because the argument is that in 2018 they paid about a total of about $26 million to Safaricom as MTR costs, both for SMS and voice, and they could do it 26 million shillings on the P&L, even for their balance sheet purposes. Do you think there's a strong case for MTR to be put to zero?
If I was the smaller player in the market, I would push for that case. But look at it in terms of Safaricom's position.
Yeah.
They say they cannot be punished for being dominant. They cannot be punished for investing or being innovative.
Or being successful.
Yes, for being successful. So
Yeah.
they say they have invested in this. They have spent a lot of money building the brand, building the network.
And building the masts.
Yes, the mass,
Okay.
the
towers.
the base towers. So they're saying we have invested in this. Why should a new player or why should the other players ride on this?
Yeah.
That's why they are opposed to sharing even their base towers.
Yeah,
Because
and that's
they say they've invested a lot of money in that, and actually allowing Airtel and Telecom to ride on this means that the
So right.
competition is not fair.
Yeah. Do you think that telcos should actually is there a strong case for infrastructure sharing?
There is, in terms of increasing the coverage or making the ordinary Kenyan access or have a wider choice of mobile service providers
Yeah.
to choose from. So, for instance, if you go to remote areas in Kenya, Safaricom, being the bigger player, probably has better network coverage than the competition.
Okay.
Wow.
So there's a case. In any case, I think they're already sharing some data they're sharing infrastructure on the data side, because I think they buy each other's redundancies to the extent that if, let's say, the Chinese were digging Ngong Road and they cut your cable, and if you're Safaricom, you can easily reroute your traffic to Telecom or Airtel or even Liquid. But we are not seeing sharing, much sharing on the voice side, especially when you talk about far-flung areas.
Exactly.
Where, let's say, Safaricom is very strong and they don't want to open up their masts to other players. Yeah, so there's been a strong case, and I've seen some text in literature that is putting forward, advancing a very strong case for infrastructuring, as also partly as a means to lower the entry barriers. But now we have tower companies operating in Kenya.
Yes.
Yes. Do you think that the regulator should actually, for new entrants, should actually prohibit new entrants building towers and instead redirect them to tower companies?
First, something that comes out or should come out clear is that Safaricom have said that they're not opposed to sharing the network or sharing their base stations, but it should be on a commercial basis.
Yeah.
That means Airtel and Telecom should pay for the service.
No free rides.
Yes, because of the investment they made. With regards to the base stations, yeah, there are private companies that are now building the infrastructure,
Yeah.
which is the best way to do it, because Safaricom is a telco and is not its core business is providing the service rather than building the infrastructure. So I think the barriers, yes, they should be lowered in terms of allowing more players, because this will reduce the overall investment cost.
Yeah.
The ultimate beneficiary of all these investments is actually the Kenyan consumer.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you compare tariffs, say 10 years ago, they were probably 5 times their.
Especially during the per minute billing era.
Yes.
Yeah.
the
Which is
era.
But just to circle back on the whole tower and ownership of infrastructure, we're beginning to see the trend where private companies are beginning to own assets, tower assets in different sub-Saharan countries. Then they end up leasing this to the operators there. Does that become a threat to Safaricom's operational structure? Because today it does own its infrastructure, and when you talk about dominance, everybody says we want to share in its infrastructure. We think it's dominant because it has infrastructure, but there's this new trend of private companies owning assets across SSA and opening this up to any telecom operator who wants to come to Africa. How do you look at that? Is it a threat? Is it a complementary way of doing business for Safaricom?
It's a threat to Safaricom because this puts it on an almost level playing field with the competition, especially considering that the new entrants or the smaller players do not have to invest as much as Safaricom invested in the past. But also look at it in terms of return on investment. There's a reason why networks, say, in the northern part of the country is not as good, because the population is small. It probably doesn't make economic sense to roll out say 4G in such areas. So you'll find the basic networks are rolled out there, 2G, 3G are rolled out in such areas. So it might not really be a threat to Safaricom.
So it depends on, okay. And just coming back to that conversation, does the Communication Authority, does it have any planned auction of licenses in 2020? Because I know we've been talking about 5G and getting to that space of 5G, but then there's also the conversation that yes, Safaricom is at the forefront, but will Safaricom be the telecom that takes us into the new universe of 5G and beyond?
Safaricom is always the leader when it comes to innovation. They have been rolling out the services ahead of the competition. But we also have to ask ourselves, how many, or 4G or even 3G is it rolled out throughout or across the country?
Okay.
4G, you'll find 4G is only in the main cities or main towns in Kenya.
All right.
So as much as they might be testing the 5G,
then
still might not make economic sense to roll out 5G in mass market while 4G is still
not there.
Yeah.
So you don't see a situation where come 2020 you have an AT&T standing outside of CA offices trying to bid for one of the licenses?
No, I don't. And also telecoms are highly capital intensive business.
Exactly.
And I do not foresee, say, new entrants coming into the mainstream telco services offering voice or SMS. We might see new players maybe offering fixed data.
Okay.
But things like mobile data, M-Pesa or voice calls, we do not see new entrants.
Okay.
Because of the capital intensity, and also you enter where there are 2 or 3 dominant players.
Wow.
Who might be
really there's really no case for that. Very interesting.
Ronaldo, in the second part of the series titled "Is Safaricom Losing Its Grip?" That's a very nice wording. You talk about in the second part. You talk about OTTs,
yes,
the over the top platforms. We've had a session here on over the top platforms discussing the taxation, the regulation, and the disruptive nature of it. But let's stick to the disruptive nature of the OTT platforms. Do you think this is a threat, the OTTs?
It's a big threat. If you ask, say, the common mwananchi when they last made an international call through the normal voice call.
Yeah, I miss all the time is a WhatsApp call.
Yeah,
I make WhatsApp calls.
Call,
yeah.
Or Skype calls.
Or a Skype call, yes.
Yeah. Even Skype.
Or even Zoom.
Zoom, actually,
yeah.
Zoom for business calls.
Yeah, so the relevance of this, of Safaricom or these mobile telcos when it comes to voice calls, international calls, is reducing. And I would say it's less prevalent when it comes to local calls, but there are still people who use voice calls to call each other, even
locally, domestically, yes. Yeah. So essentially, they need to actually look at these things carefully. They need to look at them.
Yes, they are. I think they have already accepted that this is a threat, and that's why there's a push towards growing mobile data. Yeah. Because these services are dependent on data.
Okay. And let's talk club effect. You know, you mentioned that in actually the report you mentioned that Safaricom does not hold pricing power in the voice market. In fact, you cite the fact that some tariff downward adjustment in tariff, so Safaricom lose, actually upward adjustment in tariffs, yes. So Safaricom lose a little bit of market share. Well, they're still dominant, but it's a little bit of market share. How does this tally with the fact that this market has historically been known to be price insensitive, especially on the voice market? We know that it's very price sensitive on the data side, but on the voice side, we still how much of this can continue playing out this migration because of price.
Something first we have to accept is that worldwide there's a decline in the volume of voice traffic. There's a growth of OTT.
Yes.
Other markets, even SMS is quite popular too. As a means of communication.
I mean, I rarely send SMS nowadays.
Yes. Kenyans typically send WhatsApp messages as opposed to SMS. So when it comes to this, voice calls, I would say have reached a saturation point.
Okay.
The Kenyan consumer is very price sensitive, especially when it comes to voice calls and mobile data.
Yeah.
And we're also seeing a growing ownership of multiple SIM cards or phones that twin SIM phones, dual SIM phones. So someone would have a phone with 3 SIM cards. When they want to send When they want to use WhatsApp, they'll use either Telcom or Airtel, and when they want to call, they'll use say Airtel. When they want to use M-Pesa, they'll use Safaricom. When they want to send money via mobile. So this growing usage of twin SIM phones is also a threat to.
Let's talk twin SIM, because the dominance, the prominence of twin SIMs in Kenya is twin SIM capable handsets in Kenya speaks to the high switching costs. Like, for instance, we had porting. For instance, we had porting, which terribly failed, I must say. But look at it. It failed because, one, you charged 200 shillings. I don't know whether it was 200 shillings. I never tried to switch to port. And then it takes about, you have to wait for 72 hours for your line to be active. Who wants to be switched off for 72 hours? That's an incredibly long time.
Exactly.
And if you look at if you leave the porting aside, we have an intolerable. The mobile wallets are now the SIM cards. So the mobile wallets are now intolerable. So you can send money from Airtel to Safaricom. But you can't still withdraw, right? You don't think that the next big thing is being able to withdraw money from any mobile agent?
And that's what, if you read the analysis Mason report, that is one of the recommendations. So what we're having is mobile wallet interoperability. What the Airtel and Telcom are pushing for is also agent interoperability. That means you can go to one agent, an Airtel agent, and even withdraw money from your
Safaricom's
wallet.
I think it's, in a way, my contribution to this is very theoretical, because remember when EABL was in a similar situation, and the government wanted to open up the market to a number 2 international brewer, and Castle came in, and of course the competitive regulation said, people should be able to distribute product A vis-a-vis product B without any competition or without feeling undermined. But then what would happen? I mean, it's off the cuff. There's nothing formal that had been said, but we used to hear instances of a distributor of EABL goes to a bar, finds a competitor's bottles, takes all the products, pours out the liquid, and breaks it.
Was it a distributor or is EABL?
However it was done. But I'm just saying, you see that this underlying non-competitive competitive practices, that in a way your regulator says X, but then what happens in the market is Y. And I say that because when this conversation of interoperability started, we used to hear, I have a few friends who are agents, and they'd be in a place and they're having their meetings, and no one is telling them don't do business for the other operator, but it was those sorts of, we're watching you, we're keeping tabs, dare you. Tumetoka mbali in a way. So there are those competitive market practices that are not necessarily captured, so that on one end you have the regulator saying do this, but then you have on the ground, this is what's happening. Is that something that could actually strengthen Safaricom's competitive base in spite of what all these regulatory reports are saying?
One thing we need to look at is how Safaricom found itself in this dominant position when it comes to mobile money transfer. So one big thing is the number of mobile agents. You go across the country, you'll find an M-Pesa agent.
How many are they now? Are they close to 200,000? Or
about 300,000.
Wow, that's a huge number.
So the convenience outweighs the cost.
Exactly.
That's the case of Safaricom. If you look at the cost for transferring money, say Airtel and Telcom or T-Cash, they are much or considerably cheaper than Safaricom.
Yes.
But finding an agent is more difficult than finding an M-Pesa agent.
That's very true.
So as much as even all this interoperability was allowed, people would still be loyal to Safaricom.
Exactly.
Or to M-Pesa.
So in a way you're passing the regulation, but then the market practice does not.
But that takes me to something very important, which is the issue of club effect, that you feel like you're locked in, that you can't get out. And I give an example. Recently, Safaricom launched a reverse call, and they say that you can only call Safaricom network, right? And they also have this regular promotions. You get bonus airtime or bonus, I don't know, whatever. You can only call Safaricom.
And are you getting all these numerous SMSs that say type 1 to accept a verse for the day, or type 1 to accept this Kisii song? Is that product innovation, or is it just consumer annoyance?
those premium
It's
market
premium.
services.
I mean, I'm
PMSs?
asking, okay, why I'm asking this, and I'm just piggybacking on your question, is to ask, is the regulator putting a lot more emphasis on market practices as opposed to focusing on preserving and protecting the consumer? Because I know what's happening when it comes to pricing and everything else, but if you ask me from a regulatory perspective, I don't feel protected because I have all these people who are calling me press one, I pick up press one, I'm like, what is that? Or I have all these SMSs that are coming, or I never know, for instance, the constant complaint on Twitter today is you never know when your bundles expire. And why should your bundles be expiring? If you
why should I be told that? Why should I buy bread and then told you have to consume this bread by tomorrow? If you don't consume this bread by tomorrow,
how do you incorporate our
our
frustration in how you look at dominance, and more importantly, how you look at the valuation? So is Safaricom just taking a good chunk of our money and enhancing its own valuation at our expense?
Just to go back to your complaints, the customers' complaints about all this, you mentioned the club effect. I'd say it's not new. If you look at other markets like the US, probably half the calls you'll receive in a day are from marketers.
Wow.
They're from marketers or their promotions. So I think Kenya is in a better place that we're not reached that level of, or not reached that, we're not in that situation. But when it comes to this, there are a lot of things the consumer will demand, but it's a phase. It's when that part where I would say the consumer is at an advantage. Today you can call at, say, less than 3 shillings.
That's true.
For a minute. In the past it was about 10 shillings and it was billed per minute, or even it was more. I think it was almost 30 shillings per minute. So yes, we want things done our way, but we should also appreciate the efforts were made, especially when it comes to telecoms.
Okay.
So Kenya is one of the best countries in the world when it comes to telecoms.
So
when it comes to the cost, when it comes to the cost, we'll complain about the price of data, but look at the quality of data.
Yeah,
okay, that's actually very good.
Yeah,
but Kenya also has
very good.
One of the countries the highest entry barriers in the telecom market.
The quality of our data is perfect. I'm not complaining.
Ronaldo, do you think the market is right for new players?
Even if it was made cheaper to enter, would these companies compete?
What would they tap into?
Yes, the market, when you look at the number of subscribers, in a country of close to 50 million, you have over 35 million subscribers. When you look at the loyalty of customers, people only talk about Safaricom. Okay, lately they've started talking about Airtel because of the lower tariffs. But a new entrant, we saw ESA through their brand new try entering the market and they failed miserably. Telcom has decided to take a different strategy and look at things like fixed data, mobile data as an entry point, because they know on voice calls they could shake Safaricom a bit, but they cannot compete effectively or at par with Safaricom.
Yeah.
So whether the market is ripe for new entrant, I would say no entrant would consider entering this market at the current situation.
That's a bad call.
Hold on, maybe not necessarily. Let me ask this question differently. So this weekend we have the Free Continental Trade Area in Africa. 1.3 billion potential consumers, $3.4 trillion market. So then do you see Safaricom partnering with other telcos to offer M-Pesa services outside of Kenya? Because if you're saying the Kenyan market is saturated, then the question is there an opportunity for Safaricom to go regional?
Yes, it is, and already Safaricom is in talks about expanding services to other markets like Ethiopia, which there's new leadership and it's opening up to investment.
Okay.
One thing, when you look at across Africa, there's no country that has one dominant market player as is the case in Kenya. The closest I think is MTN.
Okay. Yes, MTN.
Ghana. MTN in Ghana, which holds slightly above 50% of market share.
Okay.
And you look at Kenya, we've come from areas of over 70% market share.
Okay.
To say 66%. Here I'm talking about subscriber numbers.
All right, so that's the...
So Kenya is unique in that sense that we have a dominant market player, one that holds almost 2/3 of market share.
Let me bring you back to your report. There's the Hafendal-Hirschman Index.
HHI.
HHI.
How do you pronounce that?
You know, I almost did a slide there. Let me focus. You know where I come from. Hafendal-Hirschman Index, the theoretical framework that you have used to determine each business line's concentration levels. I want you to walk us through it, and bearing in mind that I'm an investor in Safaricom and I'm trying to identify where there is upside with regards to the top line. How do I look at it and how do I understand that framework?
So the HHI index is one of the most commonly used indices to determine the market power of a player, and how it's calculated is that you look at the market share of each market player and you square it. So for instance, you have one that has the total should actually be 10,000.
Okay.
Yeah, the market is 10,000. So when you have fewer market players, you'll find the HHI is actually lower.
Okay.
Which means also that there's a low concentration of the sector and stiff competition amongst the players.
All right.
So when you look at the market share of Safaricom, when it comes to, say, voice calls, you'll find it's lower than the HHI score is actually lower than when the market players are fewer.
Okay.
Or where the main players have high market share.
And where is the highest HHI for Safaricom based on its products? M-Pesa?
Yeah, on M-Pesa it's significantly high because
Okay.
Safaricom holds over 70% market share.
Oh, brilliant. And on M-Pesa, money transfer and mobile payments, there's an element of Equitel that we don't tend to capture. How do we look at Equitel vis-a-vis Safaricom? Is it complementary? Is it a competitive threat? Is it something to worry about?
It's good you brought that up because when people talk about M-Pesa, they only think of it as a money transfer service.
Okay.
There are two parts of M-Pesa. There's the money transfer service and there's also the mobile payment service. When it comes to money transfer service, M-Pesa is by far the market leader.
Okay.
When you look at it in terms of mobile payment service, they've been losing market share, especially to Airtel.
Okay.
So Airtel
Is it Airtel or Equitel?
Sorry, Equitel.
Okay.
And Equitel is becoming a major player when it comes to mobile money payments.
Okay.
But there are restrictions to it because it's mainly a preserver of its customers.
All right.
In terms of customer numbers, Equity Bank or Equity Group has a big customer base.
Yes, it does.
And that's why we're seeing the market share growth goes up above 25% of
Wow.
market share.
And if I look at money transfer and mobile payments, where is the greatest upside?
I would say it's difficult to tell in terms of when you look at them individually because they're complementary services.
Okay.
I would say, in my opinion, mobile payments because there's for instance, if you walk into a supermarket and ask, I've done that before, ask the teller there, what is the nature of transactions?
Okay.
If you go to the uptown areas like Ridges, they'll tell you that over 50% is either M-Pesa or card transactions,
All
with
right.
very few cash transactions.
Okay.
But if you ask someone in the CBD in town, they'll say a lot of cash transactions followed by mobile payments.
Okay.
But what's true is that mobile payments are gaining traction. They're becoming the most popular. People walk without money because they have money in their
Exactly.
mobile wallets.
Wow.
Okay.
So there's a big opportunity when it comes to mobile payments.
Okay.
So, Ronaldo, one last question is Safaricom losing its grip?
Yes and no.
Ronaldo, you can't be on both sides of the fence. You can't be cautious.
It's a
You have
question
to-
you asked. Yes.
Yes,
Safaricom loses its grip.
This is your question.
So for instance, when you talk about voice calls and mobile data, they're losing the grip.
Okay.
When you look at mobile money, they actually have their market share intact. Interesting is fixed data because Safaricom isn't the dominant player, but it's gaining market share fast.
Yeah.
So Wananchi, which operates under the brand Zuku, is, if you look at it, 1 year ago they had over 40% market share.
Yeah.
Today Safaricom holds 30%.
Yeah, Safaricom has really been investing in the last
It
mile.
has.
Yeah.
And the FTTH,
Fantastic.
the last mile,
Fantastic.
the big investment in the last 2 years.
So are you telling your investors to buy it or to sell it, and what is your target price?
Safaricom, our target price is 27,
Wow.
30.
It's fully valued now.
So it's
Yes,
fully
it's fully
valued.
valued, but also there are other considerations to the market. You think
Would you buy the derivative? Would you short it?
I would. I think Safaricom still a good buy.
Okay.
Safaricom still a good buy
Okay.
based on the sustainability of its not necessarily its market share,
Yes.
but to look at its business, its
Okay.
able, other things beyond just the services it provides. Look at the innovation.
Okay.
Look at mobile money is big, but could get bigger. Look at fixed data.
Wow.
It's just in its growth phase.
Wow.
So there's a lot of potential.
So there's a lot of potential.
Yes.
And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Does Safaricom have its grip? Yes and no, according to Ronaldo, but he still says it's fairly valued at about 27 shillings. Derivatives launch in 2 days. Could be a potential for you to short it or go long, depending on your investment theory.
I say you go long.
You go long on Safaricom?
Yeah.
I say you shut it and let's see what happens. We leave you with 2 tables that you need to pay attention to. Recall, we were talking about NBK. We leave you on a table in terms of valuation. What is the board of directors saying? How are they arriving at 6.01 shillings per share? We also leave you with the key dates. When will KCB be required to come up with a varying offer? And if not, what dates do the shareholders need to look out for to either accept or reject the offer? Thank you so much for watching us. Again, we're already live on Metropole TV on YouTube. Look out for us there. Look out for us on Twitter. Tell us what you're thinking. Good evening.